I am so excited to be talking with you about my favorite topic in the garden, and that is winter sowing. Winter sowing is taking a container like this and mimicking nature and starting seeds outdoors, and it's effortless, it's pain-free, but what I want to talk about today is a couple of observations. One of the most common, if not the most common, question that I get in my YouTube videos like this one about winter sowing is, what happens after I winter sow my containers? I put them outside and it's February and I now see green leaves. My seeds have germinated. What am I supposed to do? Because I have weather that's going to be freezing, it's snowing. Do I move my containers? Do I put covering over them? What am I supposed to do? It evokes panic in all of us because, common sense tells us that we absolutely need to protect our seedlings that are supposed to be planted outside in the summertime. We have to protect them, right? Well, I did a little experiment because I get this question asked all the time. And the basis of winter sowing is you don't touch it. You don't move them. You don't cover them. You leave them alone and let nature take its course. That is hard for us people that kind of think, well, there's no way that container can protect the seedling. It's not like it's a blanket, right? And so as I noticed just that happening, I had my very first jug, which was bachelor buttons, germinate. So I planted this in January. And, well, what do you know? It germinated, right? You see, and they're not tiny. They're pretty big. It germinated mid-February. We had ice and snow twice since that has been germinated. We had a period of time where it was, 15, 18 degrees, and I was determined to fight what we all feel, right, and leave it alone. And as you just saw, the seedlings are beautiful. They are still tiny, they're not huge, and they did great. Say to you is trust the process. It is hard to go against what we feel as a natural instinct, and I know that's hard. I fight it myself. I've been doing this a long time. I talk about it all the time, but if you can just tell yourself, I'm going to trust the process. So next I want to talk about something that is going to be a little bit of an eyebrow raiser for those of you that are seasoned winter sowers. And it all stemmed from a question that I was asked, and I want to share with you a mind easer or a workaround. Okay, so the question was, hey, I followed you this year and I saw that you put slug bait on your containers before you sealed them, which is something that I did brand new this year. And there is a reason why, which I'll share with you in a minute. But the question is, hey, as I look at my containers as they've been sitting out in the elements, since I did that, I'm noticing the slug bait looking like it's molding, and I'm a little concerned. So I have been studying my containers, and they too are doing the same exact thing. And so I want to show you what it is that we're talking about. Okay, look in here, for example. You can kind of see that they look a little hairy. That is the slug bait, and mine are doing the same thing. Now, in my mind, that does not bother me because I feel that the slug bait is not going to do anything to cause my seeds not to germinate. However, I also know that typically when I am sharing my process, it is not really my first time doing something, that I have had experience with it before I share it. And this year I did not do that. And so that's why I wanted to make this portion of the video for those of you that followed me in my process and also did the slug bait. I wanted to tell you about a workaround, okay? And it is a little bit controversial. And so I also want to share with you my motto for winter sowing is twofold. Number one, it's trust the process, as I've said. And number two, it's I want plants at the end of this by whatever means necessary. Because you see this big old garden, I could not afford to take and buy enough plants to fill up and make it look the way that it does with the way that it does from the winter sowing and the indoor seed starting. So, because we are talking about winter sowing, I want to speak to this. Okay, so first I want to tell you a story of what happened to me last year. And I'm going to try and make it not confusing. So if I make it confusing, just ask, okay, before you do anything. So last year on April 1st-ish, end of March, 1st of April, I came out, all of my jugs were sitting right here in this space. I came out and I noticed that the majority of my jugs had been eaten alive by slugs, to the point I only had stems on a lot of my containers. They were eating them, tearing them apart, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it like, I've got to do something because by whatever means necessary, I have to have plants. Okay, so the date is the key. It was around April 1st. My last frost, meaning right around the time I'm going to open my container, is April 20th. So in 20 days, I had to have plants so I could put them in my garden, and the slugs were making that just about impossible. So I knew that I had to do something, and I thought about taking them and putting them up on my porch up there, but I didn't want to do that because I had so many jugs. So another alternative, I just kept thinking, like, I could put them on a tarp. Slugs will go on the tarps. You know, some of you may be thinking, well, there's workarounds. You could have put coffee filters in the bottom. I did, and they bypassed it and went to the leaves, okay? So just keep in mind, they were already planted, they had already germinated, and I was nearing the time when I would be opening them, so we should have nice, lush plants, and I did not because of slugs. So I thought, okay, how did I combat slugs from eating all my plants last year, which would have been the year before, and I knew I had slug bait. So what I did is I came out here and I sprinkled in the tops of my containers that had germinated the plants, and I watered them and I left them. And so that's where the idea for me came from. Now, we had a late frost last year, and so I didn't open my containers until May 1st, and so it worked. I did not have slugs. The seeds grew and put on new leaves, and I had, it was great. So the part that is the eyebrow raiser is what I also did on this day. And I'm very hesitant to tell you about this because it is not the proper winter sowing thing to do. But I had maybe 4 or 5 containers around the 1st of April that had not germinated. And so what I did is I opened those containers. Now, there was no green whatsoever. So what I was seeing is it wasn't going to happen for me. And I don't know what caused that. I don't know why. But I did open those containers. I sort of ruffled up the soil, maybe put some fresh on there that was prepared the same way we did, and I sowed some more seeds. And I also sprinkled the slug bait on there. I sealed them and I put them out. Now, I tell you that because I always say don't open your containers until after your last frost. And so as a beginner, I don't want you to think, oh gosh, it's been 2 weeks and I have no germination and I need to open my containers. Please don't do that. Please, please, please. Hear what I'm saying. The temperatures were super warm. I should have had really nice 1-2 inch plants by that time. The soil temperature was warm. We were having really nice hot days. So I should have had really, really good plants growing like I had in all the other containers. And there were a couple that had not germinated. And so I took it upon myself to go ahead and open them back up, sprinkled some new seeds, and it was almost like you were starting them inside because the soil was already warm, and so it didn't take them quite as long to germinate. And I did not open those containers on the same time as May 1st. I put those out and opened them at a later date, just to give them a little bit more time to keep going. Then when I did open them, they still weren't super tall. So what I did is I left them open and left them in the containers, and I planted them later. So I also think that would work for those of you, that would be a great workaround for those of you that are in warmer zones that don't have that cold period as long, and that kind of worry about that. And so I absolutely do not want to come across as being dishonest or telling you to do something, and I also don't want you to worry that if your seeds don't germinate and you've put snail bait in there, that it's just the end. Because last year, not because of the same reason, but last year I had the jugs that did not, because I was putting the snail bait in. I saw some and I was like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and just reseed these. And it worked. Most of them germinated. So sometimes you get bad seeds. Sometimes it just, I don't know. They could have rotted in the moisture. You just never know. So I wanted to share that with you as a workaround. Please, please, please don't open your containers. If you haven't given it enough time, that's not what I'm telling you to do. And I don't want to give you advice against what winter sowing is. So I'm so leery to tell you this, but at the same time, I hope you understand what I'm saying, that if you get to the end and you don't have any seeds that have germinated and it's warm outside and you should have already had some plants growing, go ahead and open it up and then sprinkle your slug bait. But I I highly recommend the snail and slug bait, even if you wait until you see plants germinating and you just sprinkle it down in and mist it. So I hope that is helpful. I hope I didn't confuse the process. Again, in my mind it makes sense, but sometimes what comes out of my mouth doesn't. So if I'm at all confusing, it's so important to me that you get this and that I don't make it to where you think that's not winter sowing. And here you are telling me, don't open the containers yet. You just said that you did it. And, please know that everything is an experiment. I like to try new things. And so for some of you, winter sowing is a new thing, and I want you to trust the process the right way. But if you see that you aren't getting results and it's time to open your containers, go ahead and reseed them. See what happens. So I also want to share with you the last bit of this is that you definitely want to, as the temperatures start to warm, the soil starts to warm, you want to make sure that you are staying on monitoring the moisture in your container. So I want you to come out here, stick your eye in there, and make sure that you see nice soil that doesn't look dried out. So that one looks pretty dried out. So what we're going to do, and I would say as the temperature is warm, you're going to need to do this probably daily. But what I do is I stick my spray bottle down in there. Teddy's helping me. Teddy. Oh my goodness. I mean, how do you say no to this cute face? You want to be sprayed? Here. You want to just monitor for moisture. You want to make sure that you are good and that you just kind of pay attention to what's happening outside as the temperature is warm. Now, the last thing I want to say to you is, remember, you do not open your containers. It's going to be so hard you're going to see the plants coming out of the tops. I'll show you some pictures of what mine looked like before I opened them. You're going to want to open these containers so bad because they look like they're crowded and crammed, and I just got to open them because they're going to die because they're so tight in there. Trust the process. Do not open those containers until after your last frost. And when you are ready and you get to your last frost date, for me, I'm going to say April 20th. I'm in zone 8A. When it was 7B, it was April 20th. But we always have these crazy last minute frost or freezes. So I am going to wait. I would rather wait than be impatient. Okay, so what's going to happen is you are going to get to your last frost date. Say I'm standing at April 20th. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my weather app and my local forecast. And I am going to look at the 10-day forecast. I'm going to look at the nighttime temperatures, and I am going to make sure that I am not going to have any freezes. I'm looking for about 50-degree nights, 45 to 50-degree nights, and I am going to make sure that that is consistent. If there's any dips in the temperature, I'm not opening my container. So once you get past that threshold, and you will see it, it starts to even out. That's when you open your containers. Now, when you open your containers, you're going to want to leave them open for a couple of days to get the plants acclimated to being in open air, because in the containers they are protected, so there's no wind that's getting them. There's no, they are hardy and they are strong, but sometimes they're a little like weak and floppy, and so you just want to give them a little bit of time to be like, okay, I'm good. Then you can go ahead and plant them. So you just want to go through the process, make sure that you're okay. The very last, and I know I said this just a second ago, but I do want to say this. I have also gotten questions asking me what I fertilize my containers with. I do not put any fertilizer whatsoever in my containers, not when I plant them, not while they are growing, not when I open them. When I plant them is the first time that I fertilize them, and this is kind of what I use. I use the Miracle Grow plant food, this is tomato, but it is water soluble. You put it in a hose sprayer and it mixes, and I just water. And that's how I water my seedlings once I have planted them and they have been established. I do not put fertilizer on them at all, any way, in the containers or as soon as I plant them. I give them just a little bit of time. I don't want to burn them up. I don't want to stress them. I just want to allow them to get used to being in their new home. And then I'm going to fertilize them. So I hope that is helpful. I think that covers the questions that I have gotten about the jugs, moving them. What do I do if they're germinated? What do I do about this snail bait? And how do I know when it's time to open my containers? I just wanted to make sure that you know and you're clear in the information that I have. And by all means, if you want to experiment, I always say experiment, okay? So I hope that has been helpful. I hope you still will watch and not think I'm nuts. And I hope you will go out, get your hands dirty, and have the very best day ever. Happy March, and I will see you in another video soon. I'm Kim, and I'll see you in the garden. Take care. Y'all, look at these. No way.